most of what we think we know about the Voynich Manuscript is downstream of one or two sources, and those sources had reasons to lie. Let's pull on that thread. The manuscript is real. The vellum has been radiocarbon, dated to somewhere between 1404 and 1438, early 15th century, a generation before Gutenberg. It's written in an unknown script, illustrated with plants that mostly don't match any identifiable species, astronomical diagrams, and a deeply strange section showing rows of small figures in pools of green liquid. It's been analyzed by some of the best cryptographers who ever lived, including the man who helped break Japanese naval codes in the 1940s. None of them could read it. What over 2 centuries of serious analysis has established is, mostly, what the manuscript is not. That's where the interesting work actually lives. Start with what's solid. The physical object, roughly 240 pages of vellum, written in an unknown script by at least one hand, bound in a quire structure consistent with early 15th century European bookmaking. A radiocarbon test conducted by a team at the University of Arizona dated the parchment to approximately 1404 to 1438. That's the vellum. Theoretically, someone could have written on old parchment. But the consistency of the iron gall ink chemistry with early 15th century practice makes a significantly later date of composition unlikely. The manuscript now lives at Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library as MS 408. Provenance is partial but traceable. The earliest solid reference to the manuscript is a letter written around 1637 by a Prague alchemist, possessed it for years, and was writing to Athanasius Kircher, the Jesuit polymath in Rome, to ask for help deciphering it. He described the manuscript as containing what he called Oriental knowledge, and seemed convinced it held genuine secrets. Kircher apparently never replied, or if he did, the reply hasn't survived. Around 1666, a rector of the University of Prague sent the manuscript to Kircher in Rome along with a letter, under the command of. That letter is important because it's the source of the most dramatic claim in the manuscript's history, that it had once been owned by Emperor Rudolf II of Bohemia, who supposedly paid 600 ducats for it. But the letter's author was writing decades after Rudolf's death, passing along second-hand information. The 600 ducat figure comes only from that single letter. After Kircher, the manuscript disappears from the record entirely until 1912, when a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich purchased it from a Jesuit library in Italy near Rome. He gave it his name. Now the part people skippy, what 2 centuries of serious analysis has actually eliminated. The script has roughly 25 to 40 distinct characters, depending on how you parse certain glyphs, and the text has statistical properties that linguists describe using a concept called Zipieff's law. Frequency follows the pattern you see in natural languages, where a few words appear constantly and most appear rarely, on the command of. That observation was the early argument that the manuscript must mean something. Random noise doesn't produce Zipfian distributions. Neither does most gibberish. But the entropy is low, much lower than natural languages. There are almost no words longer than about 10 characters. Certain short words appear with a clustering frequency that's unusual. And here's the detail that stops me every time I look at this: there are almost no corrections in the text. No crossed-out words, no interlinear revisions, no marginal second thoughts. Anyone who has ever written anything by hand knows you make mistakes. Command of medieval scribes correcting manuscripts is one of the best documented behaviors in the paleographic record. The absence of corrections in the Voynich Manuscript is, depending on your theory, either evidence of careful copying from a prior draft, or evidence that the text was being generated rather than composed. Friedman, the American cryptographer whose team broke a major Japanese naval cipher in the Second World War, spent years on the Voynich Manuscript and produced no solution. He eventually concluded, tentatively, that it might be a constructed philosophical language, an artificial language designed to categorize all human knowledge, a real genre of intellectual project in the 17th century, under the command of. But Friedman was working from the assumption that the manuscript meant something. That assumption, as it turns out, is not settled. What's been ruled out: simple substitution ciphers, straightforward encoding of Latin, or any other known European language, and, because the vellum has been dated, wholesale forgery after the 15th century of. The parchment is old. Whatever was written on it was almost certainly written when the parchment was made. Three serious positions occupy the current debate. The first is that the manuscript encodes a real language, natural or constructed, through some form of cipher, notation, or abbreviation system. This could be a natural language nobody has identified, a regional dialect, or a deliberately artificial vocabulary. Researchers who favor this viewpoint to what appear to be internal structural differences between sections of the text, different dialects, visible in word frequency and character distribution, identified by a researcher named Prescott Currier in the latter half of the 20th century. He labeled these Currier A and Currier B. If the text has internal dialectal variation, that's more consistent with a real language, or a real attempt to simulate one, than with random mechanical generation. The second position is the hoax theory. A computer scientist presented an argument in the early 2000s showing that a cardon grill, a card with holes cut in it, command of, dragged across a prepared table of syllables, could mechanically generate text with statistical properties matching the Voynich Manuscript. The cardon grill was real early modern technology used for encipherment under the thus command of. His argument was that the manuscript might be a 15th century forgery designed to appear meaningful while containing nothing. The argument hit hard because it attacked the core statistical evidence that had been used to argue for genuine content. But critics pointed out that grill-generated text doesn't match all the manuscript's properties, particularly the consistency of word clustering across hundreds of pages and the internal Currier ABB distinction under the command of. The third position is the most cautious. We lack sufficient context to interpret the manuscript at all. The illustrated sections, botanical illustrations, what appear to be astronomical or cosmological diagrams, a zodiac-like calendar, the mysterious bathing figures. don't correspond cleanly to any known genre of 15th century European manuscript. Without knowing what tradition the manuscript comes from or what problem it was designed to solve, applying completely the wrong interpretive framework. Here's where the record puts me. The mechanical generation theory is elegant, and I take it seriously. But I don't find it fully persuasive. The consistency of the text across different sections, the internal courier distinctions, and the way certain words cluster in specific sections in patterns that echo how technical vocabulary clusters in real herbals or pharmacological manuscripts. All of that argues against pure noise generation. If someone was running a grill over a syllable table for hundreds of pages, the output should be more uniformly random. What we actually see has a kind of local coherence that I can't entirely explain away. But I'm equally skeptical of the decipherment attempts. Over the past few decades, multiple researchers have announced partial solutions. This word corresponds to that plant name, command of. This section is written in an extinct dialect of this language, and every serious claim has failed under scrutiny. Command of. The manuscript seems to resist the approach of anchoring from a single identified word and working outward. Whatever system underlies it, if a system exists under the command of, it doesn't map onto known lexicons the way you'd expect if any proposed key were correct. The detail I keep returning to is the absence of corrections. That's not how medieval scribes wrote. It's not how anyone writes anything. The command of. Either the text was being copied very carefully from a finished prior draft, which means there was an earlier version that's now lost, or the text was being produced pod of. The difference matters enormously, and we can't determine which from what survives. Here's what the record genuinely doesn't give us. We don't know who wrote the manuscript. Single hand or multiple hands is itself debated. Some researchers see consistent, idiosyncratic letterforms throughout. Others see evidence of at minimum two different scribes in different sections. We don't know where it was made. The vellum's regional origin hasn't been pinned down. Under the command of, certain characters in the zodiac section appear to be labels in a variant of Latin script, under the command of, but the language those labels represent is disputed. Researchers have proposed regional Central European dialects, but no consensus has formed. We don't know if Rudolf Succato-Iyer of Bohemia ever owned it. That claim comes from a single second-hand letter written decades after Rudolf's death. It's plausible. Rudolf collected strange objects compulsively, and a mysterious, encrypted manuscript would fit his documented taste for arcana. But it's not verified. We don't know what the illustrated plants are. Dozens of researchers have attempted to match the botanical drawings to identifiable species, and almost none of the proposed identifications have survived peer scrutiny. The plants may be composites, symbolic, or simply invented. And we don't know whether the text means anything at all. Command of. That's the uncomfortable conclusion 2 centuries of serious analysis has left us with. We cannot rule out that the Voynich Manuscript is an elaborate 15th century production whose function was entirely different from what we're looking for, or perhaps had no function beyond its own existence. The hook, asked what 2 centuries of cryptanalysis has actually ruled out. The honest answer: simple ciphers are ruled out. Post 15, the century forgery of the vellum is ruled out. Pure random noise is ruled out. That's roughly the list. Who wrote it, what it encodes, whether it encodes anything. All still open. What survives is often what was useful to power, not what was true. Under the command of. The Voynich Manuscript survived because it was peculiar enough to collect and obscure enough to keep collecting. What it was for, to whoever made it, we may never know. Until next time.